Alrighty, hello again, everybody. So I am on the page that we left off with yesterday. So we were talking about the golf balls, the distance that 20 members of a team hit a golf ball. So you should still have this saved in your calculator, but if you don't, if you can go ahead and go to your L1 list and type in all those numbers again. So remember, that is stat, edit, and then where it's L1, you're going to enter all of this data information. Okay, so if you don't have that saved from yesterday, pause me, enter all that in right now. Okay, so you should have all that entered. And this is what we did yesterday. So we figured out how to make a histogram or a bar graph using the instructions that we have right here. So you should have this down from yesterday too. So that's turning your stat plot on, making sure you have the bar graph selected, and telling it to pull from the right list. So in most cases, that's L1. And then you can hit that zoom 9 that says stat, making sure there's nothing else in your y equals window, because then it's going to try to like make a bar graph and graph an equation. So make sure everything in y equals is cleared out, and then you should get what I have on the left side of my screen. Okay, and that's kind of what we ended with yesterday, and then we had to stop. So kind of going with, I'm going to go to B first while we have this up, and then we'll go back to A. But we just want to copy down this histogram. So you might notice that mine has some numbers on it right now and yours probably does not, but as soon as you hit that trace button, so the button right next to graph, you should see some numbers at the bottom. May not be exactly like mine, but you should see the min, max, and the n. So while mine says 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, yours probably doesn't. It may, but it may not. But that n is telling you how many data points are in that bar. So that's the y value. So that highest one's going to be at 10. And you can arrow over and kind of look at stuff. So then it goes 8, and then there's nothing, and then 1 and 1. So highest is 10. So I'm just going to go up by 2s. Okay, so something kind of like that. Or you can do all the 1s. It doesn't matter. But then we need to figure out the x-axis. So again, hitting the trace button. So the min and the max, those are the left and the right x values of that bar. So the minimum value here is at 185. And then the max of that bar is at 204. So it's saying everything in that bar is between 185 and 204. Those are the yardages of what they hit. So that is 10 data points. So that's your first bar. Okay, and then if you hit the right arrow, you see it, the little box goes on the second box. And there it says the min is 204, which makes sense. And then the max is 223. So my next tick mark, I'm just going to make 223. And that n value is 8. Okay, I'm going to arrow over one more time. And that's at 0, but it does have some x values there. So between 223 and 242, there's no data points, so that's just at 0. And then if I arrow right one more time, that's 261. That's also at 0, so nothing there. Okay, I did that too small. And then arrow over again. Now I do have a data point here. This is only 1, but the min there is 261, max is 280. Well, that's only 1, so something like that. And then the last one is between 280 and 299. And that's also only 1. Okay, so it's really just using that trace button and figuring out what your X's and your Y's are. And you have your histogram. Okay, now I'm going to go back to A and show you how to find the calculations. So based on that set of data, finding some different things. So this is actually on the previous page right here. To analyze the data, these are the 3 buttons you're going to hit: stat, calc, and then one variable, stats. So stat is kind of next to the X button, so you hit stat. Edit was where we found our lists. We typed in the numbers. If you arrow to the right, that's the calc. And the first option is one variable stats. That's what we want. Okay. Now yours might look a little bit different than mine, but all of the information is the same. So mentioned this earlier, but the mean or the average in your calculator, that's noted by X bar. So when you see that X bar, that's the mean. So calculator says that's 209.25. That's the average distance a golf ball was hit. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the MED, the median, that's 205. So on the list, that's the number that would be right in the middle. The standard deviation, that on your calculator is noted by S and then with a little X. That means standard deviation, like how far things are from the mean. So that's about 24.6. Okay, now this doesn't specifically tell you what the range is, but we did talk about range before right here. Range is the difference between the greatest and the least values in a set of data. So it's the max minus the min. And your calculator does tell you that. So the max, if I scroll down, the max is 280. And the min is 185. And if you subtract those, you get 95. So the range is 95. And then the IQR, we also talked about that yesterday. That is the difference between the upper and lower quartile. So it's Q3 minus Q1. So your calculator, mine says quartile 1, quartile 3. Yours might say Q1, Q3. That's the same thing. So that's 212.5 minus 195. And that should be about 17.5. Okay. So that stat calc, one variable stats, gives you all of the information that you need about that set of data. Okay, so you have that information, you have your bar graph. Here's kind of the big part. So the summary. So it says summarize the center and the spread of the data using either the mean and standard deviation or the 5-number summary. Okay, justify your choice. So this is where we're going to need to do some writing. So whenever you're going to summarize something, and we kind of said this up here, choosing summary statistics, you always have to start with the shape. Is it symmetric or is it skewed? And we need to write like complete sentences. Okay, this can't just be like a word. We actually need to like be descriptive with our words. Okay, so I'm going to start with just describing the shape. So you can look at your bar graph or your histogram, and hopefully you notice that it is not symmetrical. Okay, it's not like around the middle and everything kind of falls nicely around it. It is definitely skewed. And then you can either say left and right or positive and negative. And remember, that's where the tail goes. So the way this data is kind of trending, that tail is off to the right. So it's right skewed or positively skewed. Okay, so I'm going to say that first. So the distribution and, what are we talking about? The distribution of distance traveled by golf balls is positively, or you could say right skewed. Okay, so that's the first thing that we need to say. Is it symmetric or is it skewed? And which way is it skewed? Okay, if you have any outliers, generally we want to describe those as well, because that kind of helps with the shape too. The outliers, when you're looking at this, is like anything that really doesn't fit with the data, and you can kind of look at like the numbers too, like 185, 185, 190, like those are all in that first big set here. But I would say probably the two that are way out here kind of are the two that don't fit with, sorry, those aren't very big, with all of the other data points. So those would be like the 270 and the 280. I'm going to say there are two outliers, 270, and 280. Okay, they just don't fit with the rest of the data. Okay, so now kind of the heart of this is describing the center and the spread. Okay, so we said that the data was skewed, or the shape was skewed. So I'm going to go back up here. When you talk about the center, you have two options. You either talk about the mean or the median. So we said if the data is skewed, we talk about the median. So center, I'm going to say the median distance is what we found on our calculator, which was 205. Okay, so center is either mean or median. Since this was skewed, we're going to use the median. I'm just going to write that here, because skewed. That's just a side note. Okay, and then last thing is the spread. So when you talk about the spread, then you also have to decide what am I going to use to describe that. So the spread is either the standard deviation, but you do that when it's symmetric, or the 5-number summary, which is skewed, which is what we're going to do. So we're going to use the 5-number summary. Okay, so we're going to describe the range and the interquartile range. That's really those two things right there. So I'm just going to make a note. Because skewed. Okay, so we can say the range. The range of the distance traveled is from, so that'd be your min to your max. So from 185 to 280. Okay, and then I'm also going to say, and half of the distances. So this is your IQR. I'm just going to scroll up really second. We're not done. Where did it go? I'm looking at like the box and whisker plots. This right here is the IQR, the Q3 to Q1. And this is half of your data. It's 50%. So that's usually what we'll say. Half of the data is the IQR between Q1 and Q3, whatever those are. So half of the distances were between whatever your Q1 was. So looking at the calculator, the Q1 was 195. And Q3 was 212.5 yards. Okay, so that's a pretty good description. And then you can always list what the range was. So we said the range was 95 yards, and the IQR was 17.5, and that's just what we found earlier. Okay, so it's going to be more writing than we are probably used to. Okay, but that is kind of your first look at how you write a summary of statistics. Okay, so practice using your calculator and writing the summaries. We're going to do more of this tomorrow, but you got to have that first intro to it. Okay, email me if you need anything. There is a lesson check on Schoology for you to try. All right, thanks guys. Bye.